In today's video, I wanted to discuss the Wizard's Tower expansion featured in the Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion. This expansion adds a whole new base of operations for the player, a small quest, as well as tons of new fun and useful features to discover. As per usual, the facts and information provided are brought to you by the game itself and are supplemented with the unofficial Elder Scrolls wiki. The Wizard's Tower expansion was the third DLC to be released for Oblivion, having come out in April of 2006, so just barely a month after the game's initial release. As I've mentioned in my Fighter Stronghold video, I've never had the pleasure of playing through any of these DLCs, minus the Shivering Isles and Knights of the Nine, although my first with the former was whilst playing through it for this channel. The Wizard's Tower expansion begins right away when the player boots up the game. After the DLC is installed, the player will receive a quest notification called Frostcrag Spire. Apparently, a deed has been delivered to the character from a long-lost relative, claiming that this tower has been passed on to you. Its location has been marked on your map. Peering at the deed, it reads, "This document is to inform the bearer that the last known owner of the property, known as Frostcrag Spire, has been declared deceased, and the bearer has been listed as the sole heir and successor to the deceased ownership of said property. The bearer has full ownership rights to all of the structures, flora, and land within the property borders as defined in the Cyrodiil Construction Charter. The bearer is responsible for all matters pertaining to or occurring on said property. This document also empowers the bearer to transfer rights to reassign the property as he sees fit. The bearer may amend this document to rename the manor by submitting the proper forms and payments to the Cyrodiil Construction Charter and by filling duplicate forms with the Documents Division of the Imperial City Archives." Looking at the map, Frostcrag Spire is located up in the Jurel Mountains, slightly southeast of Knoll Mountain and just above the U in County Bruma. Interestingly, Frostcrag Spire can be fast traveled to without the need for discovery. Upon arrival, the player will be met with the sight of a grand and unique tower. Its construction is rather odd and unconventional, but that's what makes it the dazzling building that it is. Approaching the tower, the player ascends multiple levels of stairs before receiving a quest update. Making your way inside of the wonder, the front entrance is equally as puzzling. It's a small circular room with strange icy objects protruding out of the floor. In the center, there's a frost atronach buried under some ice. Its hand is sticking out, and laying in its palm is the Frostcrag Spire Memoirs. Cracking open the book, it reads, "As I pen this, I gaze upon the walls of my home and remember the very day its design came to fruition. Although it seems like yesterday, it was actually many years ago. I was an impetuous wizard. I wasn't simply satisfied living at the Arcane University. I spent years coming up with a design for my home, a place where I could practice my magic in peace and keep myself away from the prying eyes of my colleagues. I pored over tomes and dusty scrolls, scoured the bookshops of the land, and even delved into ancient ruins looking for inspiration. Finally, as I rested my weary body at a camp outside of Bruma and marveled in awe at the majesty of the Jurel Mountains, I became inspired. Like a madman, I began to sketch exactly what I wanted my grand dwelling to look like. It wasn't long before I'd completed my masterpiece, put down my quill, and took a step back to see what I had wrought. Frostcrag Spire was born. And now, as age overwhelms me and the glow is dying from my eyes, I wish to give the spire to you. The thought that my dream could one day crumble to ruin fills me with sadness. I know that you'll take care of your new home, and if need be, restore it to its former glory. Please, heed my instructions carefully. There's much to tell and the strength drains from my limbs. Frostcrag Spire contains many wonderful inventions. I've spent my whole life perfecting them, and I hope you'll put them to good use. My pride and joy is the Atronach altar. By bringing 3 salts from the very same creatures to this altar, you can summon an Atronach familiar to do your bidding. It will obey your simple commands and defend you in times of need. Should you tire of it, simply speak to it and dismiss it. These fine creatures have protected me in my travels and should be of great use to you. With permission from the Arcane University, I've had a spell making and an enchanting altar placed in the tower as well. You have but to provide the mage tallow candles to power them, and they will serve you well. Working closely with my good friend Sindarian, the master alchemist of Skingrad, I have developed the Frostcrag Apparatus Table. This table is for the discerning alchemist, and should help even the most difficult brews become easier to create. I've also reseeded my alchemy conservatory with the best ingredients Cyrodiil has to offer, and some from beyond her borders. Finally, I have created portals to all of the mages guilds in Cyrodiil. This should make it easier to travel to them in times of need. I've entrusted most of my belongings to Aurelinway at the Mystic Emporium in the market district of the Imperial City. There, you'll find everything you need to bring Frostcrag Spire back from the dead. She may require compensation for her time and care watching these special items, but I assure you, it's well worth the coin. Please take care of Frostcrag Spire. She was my home, and much of my life is infused with the stone and mortar. May your journeys be safe, and the roads you travel free of danger. After the journal is put down, the icy objects on the floor begin to move and activate. Following this, the back wall of the room slides open, revealing the rest of the wizard's tower. This next area is a lot grander and more spacious than the foyer. It holds magical portals that teleport the player to places like the Spire Vault as well as the living area. In front of the portals are 3 circular patterns on the ground, one containing lava, the other frost, and the third stone. Beyond the elemental patterns is an elevated area that holds an altar of enchanting, the Atronach altar, and an altar of spellmaking. The interior design of the tower is honestly very distinctive and has a good sense of individualism. I was really keen on seeing the rest of it, but for now, I wanted to buy all of the upgrades, so that way it's restored to its former glory. The memoirs call out an NPC named Aurelinway, who was added into the game via the install of this expansion. Something important to bring up, as pointed out by the unofficial Elder Scrolls pages, is that there are high possibilities for bugs to occur during this portion of the quest. It's apparently due to a data clash between Fighter Stronghold and Wizard's Tower. Even odder is that this clash solely affects the Mystic Emporium, which is where Aurelinway needs to be in order to sell you the upgrades. In short, the doors will be permanently locked, and the High Elf won't be able to enter inside. Therefore, she wouldn't be able to sell you anything. I admittedly thought my game was bugged because she was spending all her time in the Arbitorium, and there was no option to buy things from her. It turns out that that's just part of her nightly routine, as she needs somewhere to go when the Mystic Emporium is closed. Luckily for me, I waited for some time, she made her way over to the shop, and everything was okay. However, if anyone else is playing through this expansion for the first time in what's almost 2025, you may encounter this problem, which can be fixed by fiddling with your install order. Aurelinway doesn't offer any unique dialogue to the player. She sells a plethora of magical items and spells, but more importantly, the building plans for the tower's renovations. In total, there are 6 different purchases that need to be made, 4 of which are the additions, and 2 of which are the miscellaneous Mage Tallow Candles boxes. 3 of the expansions were 1,592 gold, the Alchemy Lab was 2,387 gold, and the boxes were 3,093 septims each. Buying all of them ran me a tab of over 13,300 drakes. Once all was said and done though, I received the notification telling me that I had completed the Frostcrag Spire quest, and I was ready to do a complete tour of my new home. Beginning with the outside grounds, there isn't nearly as much to do or see as say Battlehorn Castle. Being up in the Jarrow Mountains does give Frostcrag Spire a unique advantage though, in that it stands on the passageway that leads through the mountain range. This gives the player easier access to locations that are trickier to reach, say Knoll Mountain, Sidor, or Azura Shrine. While the view is something that's touched upon on a larger scale in just a bit, there's no denying that the base camp sites are simply spectacular. My in-game recording only shows a foggy landscape, but rest assured the mountain ranges, forests, and plains can be spotted with the naked eye. On a level below the tower's entrance, facing southwest, the player will find a pre-existing abandoned camp. This camp has a chest with some stuff in it, but of course, this is nothing compared to what's inside the tower. Speaking of which, it's time to get into the real meat and potatoes of this tour by moving on to the interior. Not much has changed in the main vestibule. The Frost Atronach's hand is still protruding out of the ice, and the icy mystical circles are still glimmering with magic. However, a very minor, neat feature, as pointed out by the UESP, is that if the player casts fire magic at certain areas of the Atronach, the ice appears to melt for a mere moment, revealing a clearer image of the snowman below. Moving into the central area, there were definitely some significant changes made. For starters, in the corners of either side of the room, bookshelves with plenty of reading material were added in. These books comprise of the lore and skill variety. There are also a number of alchemy apparatuses placed around, either to help the player in their potion making craft or as a push for them to start. Accompanying these scholarly nooks are seating areas and tables. Moving along to the elevated area, there are more bookshelves for the player to spend time at, but more excitingly, the 3 altars are ready for use. Approaching the enchanting and spell-making altars, the player needs to activate them first in order to place the mage tallow candles. Once done, they're ready for use and provides the player with a great convenience. If you're not a part of the Mages Guild, have been kicked out, or simply wish to not step foot into the Arcane University, the altars can be utilized. Next, let's take a look at the feature many would be the most curious about, the Atronach altar. Approaching and interacting with it, the game asks whether you'd like to summon a Storm, Frost, or Flame Atronach. If the player has secured 3 samples of either Frost, Flame, or Void salts, the appropriate being can be summoned. They take the forms of familiars, and are a lot smaller in stature than their wild counterparts. You can interact with them and give them the following commands to follow, wait, or to be dismissed. As mentioned in the memoirs, the Atronachs act as permanent followers. They'll accompany you all throughout Cyrodiil and will even die fighting for you. I tested out the Frosty's combat abilities against some bandits, and it held its own for a while, but with no help, it ultimately didn't last long in battle. Moving along to the other areas of the tower, the next portion is the portal that leads to the Spire Vault. The vault is quite a unique space. It's an icy underground den that holds numerous chests and containers. Flying around the room are tiny friendly imps called Vault Guardians. The chests and containers don't hold anything too crazy in them, but they are all non-respawning, making them safe for player storage. Looking at the vault's walls, the player will come across a few interesting details. The first and least of which is a humble wine rack. Most of these are cheap makes, except for the bottle of Shadow Banish standing atop of the rack. This can help the player along if they have yet to complete the side quest, A Venerable Vintage. The second and most interesting find are 2 tombstones. One of them belongs to someone named Lenassin, who was a master at storytelling and writing. Activating their tombstone gives you the temporary blessing called Lenassin's Touch. This fortifies personality for 10 points, and the skills of speechcraft and mercantile for 15 points. The other headstone belongs to someone named Rincy, a remarkable archer and aficionado of Tamrielic ales. His most famous beverage being Daedric Lava Whiskey, a drink discovered all the way out in the Deadlands. Coincidentally, after activating his stone, the lava whiskey is added to the player's inventory. It's quite the interesting drink, as it restores 20 health for 20 seconds on self and summons a Dromora Lord for 60 seconds, but it also paralyzes the drinker for 10 seconds and deals 1 point of fire damage for 10 seconds on self. The Vault Guardians are certainly tougher than they look, as they have decent amounts of health and can cast some feisty destruction spells. I tested out their abilities by spawning in a bandit, but the Guardians work in mysterious ways. The bandit had to make the first move and was able to kill a few of them before I stepped in. I guess it's a good thing that the player can't be stolen from in this game. Returning back to the main entrance, the other teleporter leads to the living area. It's a quaint and cozy room. There are furnishings which contain storage space, some books, potions, as well as alchemy and enchanting tools. Atop one of the bookshelves, the player will come across a jewelry box which contains a powerful enchanted ring called the Pentamagic Loop. This ring fortifies all the major schools of Magicka, barring alteration, for 5 points each. If the player stands near the alchemy table on the other side of the room, similar to the Dwemer Forge in Battlehorn Castle, you'll receive an active effect called Alchemical Brilliance. This temporarily fortifies your alchemy skill by 15 points. Affixed to the living space is another teleporter, a door leading outside, and a botanical garden. The garden portion itself is quite intriguing and useful. There are 3 different sections filled with varieties of flora found across Cyrodiil and beyond, all blended together for the budding alchemist's dream. There are 30 different species present, and almost all of them have 3 or more samples to take. Of course, these samples will grow back, and the player can harvest them all over again. As pointed out by the unofficial Elder Scrolls pages, there is some rare herbage that grows here. Examples laid out include 1 Nirnroot, which is needed for the Seeking Your Roots side quest. The garden contains rice plants, which apparently are otherwise only found in food sacks around Cyrodiil. There's also the domesticated Spittlestick, which is native to Oblivion. They normally release a toxin affecting the player's stats, but this version in the Wizard's Tower has been altered to leave those harmful effects out. Moving on from the gardens, the next area is through a portal which leads to the very top of the tower. This portion serves as a lookout and far surpasses the view I tried to show off earlier. Looking south, the player has a clear view of the Heartlands as well as the Imperial City and its rolling hills. To the east, you can see Shadenhall along with the Valis Mountains. To the west, the player can place their eyes on the nearby city of Bruma and the rest of the Jarrow mountain range. Finally, the view to the north is slightly blocked by the tower's decorations, but the player can see a glimpse of 200 some odd years into their future, or 5 years of real world time. The final spot for the tower's tour has us going back into the living area, then through the old rusted door leading out into the Jarrows again. This little balcony of sorts contains a portal leading to every single Mages Guild hall in Cyrodiil. Activating any of them will bring you to that respective hall's front entrance. From there, the player can resume their duties, whether it's for business or pleasure. I will say, I originally thought these portals were mostly useful for completing the recommendations portion of the guild's questline. Then I realized that the time it takes you to exit the hall, fast travel back to the tower, which by the way, places you far away from its entrance to begin with, teleport all the way back up and then to the next hall, is probably more time consuming than just traveling to the city itself and walking to the guild hall. I guess the advantages it does provide though are ease of access to one of the halls if say you need to speak with a specific NPC, need to buy a spell, or need some form of training. Perhaps the player is working on the questline and operates out of the tower. You may frequently return to it after completing quests, and teleporting around from the tower makes your time spent going from hall to hall a little more efficient. Another small convenience it provides is having a separate fast travel point into any of the other major cities. Say for example you want to go to the Skingrad Fighters Guild. You can save yourself a couple of seconds by traveling to the Mages Guild and then heading straight over to the Fighters Guild. These aren't exactly groundbreaking conveniences, but they do provide something, I guess. There are 9 portals in which are supposed to lead to each major city. This includes the Arcane University, and even more interesting, the city of Kvatch. Unfortunately, the game doesn't let you travel there, and displays a message saying that the Kvatch Mages Guild is no more. I personally think it would have been really cool if Bethesda designed a hidden, small, burnt, and destroyed room that was supposed to act as the remnants of Kvatch's Hall. The room would mostly be for aesthetics, but maybe some gemstones, alchemy tools, and skill books could be strategically placed around. If we were really lucky, Bethesda would have given us small lore snippets in the form of notes or books. They could have detailed who the mages were that practiced out of this hall, and a little bit about their personalities and specialties. That just about wraps up the tour of Frostcrag Spire, and thus the Wizard's Tower expansion. I really like the tower as a place for my character to operate out of. Even though I'm playing as a warrior and I don't have much to do with the arcane arts, the altars, vault area, and portals to the guild halls could have certainly proved useful. There's definitely a little less going on here than what I saw back in Battlehorn Castle. The Wizard Tower is much smaller and feels a lot lonelier. I actually don't mind the size issue, but the lack of NPCs in life in general, minus the Vault Guardians of course, makes the tower feel like it's not quite mine. To be honest though, I have the same feelings towards Battlehorn Castle, so I think it's just a me issue. Of course, not all of the players' homes need some sort of hidden, dark secret for them to capture more of my attention, but Lord Cain and Ariel Gerard being locked away in the grotto just made the castle feel so much more interesting and lore-ridden. It would have been nice to maybe see the 2 tombstones in the vault built upon, with Rinzi and Linassen's stories getting a little more fleshed out, but hey, maybe I'm just asking for too much at this point. Overall, Frostcrag Spire was built for the player's convenience, and certainly makes the adventuring, inventory management, and foraging a little bit easier for this glorious game. What are your thoughts on the Wizard Tower expansion? And until next time, keep on adventuring.